Loretta sat at her desk in her home office, scrolling through financial documents on her computer. The room was silent, except for the soft ticking of the wall clock. Outside, dusk was settling in, and the streetlights cast a gentle glow over the well-kept front yard. She was almost done with her work when fatigue crept in. To distract herself, she began opening photos on her computer at random. The screen flickered, and an unexpected image appeared before her. A photograph. The picture showed a young pregnant woman sitting on her husband's lap. Marcus. Loretta felt her chest tighten. A sharp pulse pounded at her temples, and her fingers curled into fists. 25 years of marriage, shared dreams, years of unwavering support. Was it all for nothing? For the past few months, Marcus had been complaining about financial troubles. Their savings account had been depleting rapidly, but Loretta had never asked questions. She trusted her husband. Or at least she had, until now. She leaned in, studying the details of the image. The photo looked recent. The background resembled a hotel room. The young woman was smiling, cradling her rounded belly, while Marcus gazed at her with an expression Loretta hadn't seen on his face in years. Her mind raced. Could this be some kind of misunderstanding? There had to be an explanation. But then why was the photo stored among his work documents? Loretta took a deep breath, trying to make sense of what she was seeing. She closed the image and opened the file history. Recent transfers, cash withdrawals. It all pointed to money disappearing without explanation. Loretta had never meddled in Marcus's finances, but now every withdrawal seemed like another piece of a puzzle forming an unpleasant picture. A knock on the door startled her. She quickly closed the window with the photograph. Their daughter, Jasmine, a tall, elegant woman in her 30s, the spitting image of Loretta in her youth, walked in. "Mom, have you seen my keys?" she asked, scanning the room. "No, sweetheart," Loretta replied, making sure her voice remained steady. "Did you just get home?" "Yeah, just now. Is everything okay? You look worried." Loretta forced a smile. "I'm fine, just a lot of work." Jasmine nodded but lingered at the doorway as if sensing the tension in the room. Loretta turned back to her documents, pretending to focus. She couldn't let her daughter suspect anything. Not yet. Once Jasmine left, Loretta reopened the folder with the photos. There were more images, the same woman, different places, different dates, and in every single one, Marcus was there with her. She closed her eyes, trying to figure out what to do next. One thing was certain, this discovery changed everything. Loretta stood at the kitchen counter, mindlessly chopping vegetables. Her hands moved automatically, but her thoughts swirled chaotically. The image from earlier refused to leave her mind, the smiling pregnant woman and Marcus, full of tenderness and care. She sighed, glancing out the window. The evening lights gave the street a certain charm, but inside, all she felt was unease. The sound of the front door opening made her jump. She quickly composed herself, masking her emotions. Joshua walked in, their son. He wasn't their biological child, but he had always known that Loretta and Marcus were his real family. He was grateful to them and never hid it. "Mom, are you okay?" he asked, noticing the tension in her face. Loretta smiled, hoping it looked natural. "Of course, just tired, long day." Joshua nodded, giving her a searching look but not pressing further. He mentioned he was heading out to meet some friends and left, leaving her alone with her heavy thoughts. When the door closed behind him, Loretta leaned against the counter, trying to steady her trembling hands. She knew she couldn't just forget what she had seen. She picked up her phone, scrolling through her contacts until she stopped at Valerie's name, her old friend. How long had it been since they'd talked heart to heart? Too long. Loretta realized she needed someone to help her see the situation clearly. 100 questions flooded her mind. Who was this woman? How long had this been going on? Why hadn't Marcus told her anything? She turned off the stove, packed away the chopped vegetables, and sat at the table. The life she had thought was so solid now felt as unstable as shifting sand. Her fingers hovered over her phone screen, but she couldn't bring herself to make the call. Instead, Loretta took a deep breath and made herself a promise. She would find out the truth. Dinner conversation. When Marcus came home, he was holding a lavish bouquet of red roses. A smile played on his lips, and his eyes shone with excitement. He stepped toward Loretta, gently cupped her cheek, and kissed her. I missed you so much, he said, his voice husky. Loretta allowed him to embrace her, but inside she was torn. She could smell his cologne, hear the familiar warmth in his voice, yet she couldn't shake the thoughts that had been tormenting her all evening. They sat down at the table. Loretta had made braised chicken with vegetables, Marcus's favorite dish. He took a hearty bite, but paused when he noticed his wife's distant expression. "You're quiet tonight," he observed, tilting his head. "Is something wrong?" Loretta set her fork down, looked at him, and took a deep breath. Fear and resolve waged war inside her. She knew this conversation was inevitable, and its outcome could determine their future. "I know everything, Marcus," she finally said, her voice steady despite the tremor she felt. His hands froze mid-motion, a flicker of unease flashing across his face. He tried to smile, but it came out forced. "What are you talking about?" he asked cautiously. Loretta clenched her hands, gathering her strength. "The woman, the baby, the money you've been withdrawing." Marcus flinched as if he'd been struck. He leaned forward, clasping his hands together on the table. "Loretta," he began, but she cut him off. "Do you understand that this might not even be your child?" Her voice was firm, but deep down she prayed she was wrong. He froze. A storm of emotions flickered through his eyes, confusion, then unmistakable fear. Loretta watched him closely, trying to gauge his thoughts. Marcus exhaled slowly before speaking. "I don't even know how you found out, but believe me, I have my doubts too. I'm trying to figure this out." She raised an eyebrow. "Figure it out? How?" Her voice was sharper now, her hands trembling again. "Are you telling me you don't even know what's going on?" Marcus ran a hand down his face as if trying to wipe away the tension. "It's complicated," he said deliberately. "It's not what you think." Loretta let out a bitter laugh. "Oh, of course. It's never what I think. Maybe you could finally tell me what's really happening?" Marcus lowered his gaze, contemplating his next words. He knew lying was pointless now. The question was he ready to tell her the whole truth? The room fell into silence, interrupted only by the steady ticking of the wall clock. Loretta stared at him, her patience thinning by the second. She needed answers, now. Marcus took her hand, his fingers warm and firm. He looked straight into Loretta's eyes, knowing that the truth could change everything between them. "She's not my mistress, Loretta," he said calmly, though his voice carried an edge of exhaustion. "That girl is the daughter of a woman I dated before we got married. She reached out recently, claiming that I have an adult daughter. And now, that daughter is pregnant. They asked me for financial help." Loretta didn't break eye contact. Every word felt heavy, but the pain inside her didn't fade. "Why didn't you tell me right away?" Her voice wavered, but she forced herself to speak. Marcus sighed heavily and squeezed her hand. "I didn't know how to, Loretta. I was shocked. We met, but something felt off from the start. The girl acted strange. She hugged me, sat on my lap, and her mother filmed the whole thing on her phone. It made me uncomfortable, so I left. The next day, the photo appeared online." Loretta closed her eyes, her heart pounding. "That explained a lot, but was it the truth? And you didn't tell me because?" she asked, biting her lip to keep her emotions in check. Marcus rubbed his face again, as if trying to erase the stress. "Because I wasn't sure what was happening myself. But I made it clear from the start. I won't help them without a DNA test. I won't let them manipulate us." Loretta felt her heartbeat slow, her body releasing some of its tension. The tears she had been holding back finally spilled over. She let out a shaky breath, pressing her hand to her lips. "I'm sorry, I didn't know what to think," she admitted through her tears. Marcus didn't say anything. He simply pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. Loretta buried her face in his shoulder, inhaling the familiar scent, the scent of home, the scent of safety. "It's okay, sweetheart," he whispered into her hair. "We'll get through this, together." Loretta took a deep breath. 1,000 questions still swirled in her mind, but one stood out above the rest. How would they move forward from here? Could they rebuild their trust? And perhaps most importantly, what if this girl truly was his daughter? What if her presence wasn't just a scheme, but a piece of their future? Loretta lifted her head and met Marcus's gaze. One thing was clear, they had to uncover the truth. Marcus spent the entire night in turmoil, His thoughts were a tangled mess, doubts tearing at his mind, and the weight of the conversation ahead pressing down on his chest. He knew he had to act decisively, yet deep down, he still clung to a fragile hope that this was all just a misunderstanding. He paced around the bedroom before heading to the kitchen, pouring himself a glass of water. His eyes landed on a framed family photo. Him, his wife, and their 2 kids, all smiling at the camera. A cold knot formed in his stomach. He couldn't allow this deception to destroy their lives. Early in the morning, before breakfast, he dialed the girl's number. Taking a deep breath, he waited for the call to connect. She picked up almost immediately. "Hello? We need to meet. Without your mother," he said firmly, his voice calm but unwavering. There was silence on the other end. Marcus could picture her gripping the phone, maybe even biting her lip in hesitation. Finally, she exhaled. "All right, where?" "The cafe on 5th and Main. 1 hour." She agreed, and Marcus ended the call. His wife noticed the tension on his face but didn't say anything, only watching him with a knowing, cautious gaze. The cafe was bustling with morning customers, the aroma of fresh coffee mixed with the scent of warm bread. Marcus took a seat by the window and waited, his heartbeat quicker than usual. The girl arrived right on time. She wore a simple gray sweater and jeans, her face pale, as if she hadn't slept. She hesitated for a moment, then spotted Marcus and approached. He gestured for her to sit. For a few moments, they just stared at each other. She clenched her hands into fists, her lips trembling. Marcus remained silent, giving her a chance to speak first. When she didn't, he took the lead. "I'm filing a police report for attempted fraud," he stated clearly, his voice steady. Her eyes widened, her face turned even paler, as if the blood had drained in an instant. "No. Please," she gasped, her voice shaking. "This wasn't my idea. My mom made me do it. She wanted you back, and I just did what she told me to." Marcus studied her carefully. He searched for deception, for manipulation, but all he saw in her eyes was fear. Her breathing became ragged, her lips quivering. "Why did you go along with it?" he asked, keeping his voice cold and measured. She lowered her head. I didn't think it would go this far. At first, Mom just told me to message you. Then she convinced me to meet with you. Then she said I had to claim I was pregnant. She said if I didn't help, she'd lose her last hope." Marcus clenched his fists. Anger boiled inside him. His mind screamed for justice, for consequences. But looking at the girl, he saw not just a liar, but someone terrified, someone who had been manipulated herself. He pulled his phone from his pocket and pressed a button. "I have proof," he said, turning off the recording. She flinched. Her eyes filled with tears. "Please don't," she whispered. "She'll throw me out. She has no one but me, but I didn't know it would go this far." Marcus took a deep breath. He knew consequences were necessary, but what was he supposed to do with her? She was a pawn in someone else's game, but grown-up actions required grown-up accountability. "This isn't my problem," he said firmly. "I have to protect my family." She let out a shaky sob, biting her lip. "Please." Marcus stood up, slid his phone back into his pocket, and walked toward the exit. Behind him, he could hear her muffled crying. He knew he had done the right thing. So why did it feel so heavy? Stepping outside, he took a deep breath, trying to steady his racing heart. The events of the past few days replayed in his mind. The conversation with his wife was inevitable. She would sense something was off, and he would have to tell her the truth. And what if this girl really was a victim? Did she deserve a chance to make amends? He pulled up the number for the police station but hesitated before pressing call. The girl's terrified face flashed in his mind. He turned off his phone and closed his eyes for a moment. He had to decide, justice or compassion. Back home, Marcus felt the tension of the last few days finally beginning to ease. He shut the door behind him, pausing for a moment in the entryway, then looked at Loretta. She sat on the couch, arms crossed, clearly waiting for answers. Her eyes were tired, but more than that, they held hope. Without a word, Marcus pulled out his phone and played the recording. The girl's voice was shaky. "It wasn't my idea. My mom made me do it. She wanted you back, and I just did what she told me." Loretta listened in silence, only nodding occasionally. When the recording ended, the room was still. She closed her eyes, processing what she had heard. "Did you give them money?" she finally asked, her voice steady but laced with concern. Marcus shook his head and sat beside her, taking her hands in his. Not a cent. I won't let anyone manipulate us. Every dollar from the account went towards starting our business. Now we're building something together. Loretta let out a slow breath, as if releasing the last of her doubts. She wrapped her arms around his neck, pressing herself against him. Her shoulders trembled, but not from fear. This time it was relief. You have no idea how scared I was. How terrified I was of losing us, losing our family, she whispered into his chest. I didn't know who to trust, but my heart kept telling me you wouldn't betray me. Marcus ran a hand gently down her back. I know, sweetheart. I saw how much you struggled, how much you doubted, but I couldn't let a lie destroy us. I love you, Loretta, and I will always fight for our family. She pulled back slightly, looking into his eyes. But what if they try again? What if this isn't over? I'm scared, Marcus. Scared they won't stop. He squeezed her hands tighter. You're not in this alone, Loretta. We're in this together, and no one is going to tear us apart. I've already taken precautions. I have a lawyer. If they try again, we have all the proof we need to hold them accountable. They can't blackmail us anymore. She took a deep breath, a small smile forming on her lips. You always think ahead. That's why I love you so much. You're my rock, my safe place. Marcus brushed a hand over her cheek, locking eyes with her. And you're mine. I couldn't have gotten through this without you. You're stronger than you think, Loretta, even when you doubt yourself. We made it through this, and the future? It's only going to get better. She nodded, wiping away the last of her tears. Her arms wrapped around his shoulders again, and in that moment, they both felt unbreakable. Let's put this behind us, she whispered. Let's start a new chapter, together. Marcus smiled and pulled her close. Together, always. Through the curtains, the soft glow of the street lamp bathed the room in warm light. For the first time in a long while, Marcus felt at peace. He knew challenges lay ahead, but one thing was certain: they had survived this storm. And that was their greatest victory.